On March 13, 2018, a freedom fighter and Florida son left us. Dr. Ed James, a native Sarasotan, passed away after a full life dedicated to justice and equality for African Americans. When Dr. James gave birth to Black Almanac, he intended to give a voice to a community that the larger society would have silent. For Sarasota, Black Almanac would become one of the ultimate forms of speaking truth to power. Today's Black Almanac is a tribute to the man who helped make Sarasota a place that people of color could also call paradise. Joining us today, Edward James III, Jetson Grimes, Trevor Harvey, and Dr. Lawrence Miller. Mr. Grimes, of all of our panelists today, you probably have the longest running relationship with Dr. James, dating way back even before high school. Tell us a little bit about your time together in high school and even days before that.
Well, of course, Ed and I came out of the same neighborhood. We've been knowing each other for, I won't tell the years.
A while.
But we've been knowing each other for quite a while. I'm just kind of reflecting back to our high school days. And Ed was always a person that, I like to use the word leadership, but it was more about courage. A lot of things during the period of when he was in high school, that was, at that particular time, we was under a very conservative administration.
And this is what years?
This was the years of 1954, 53, and those years. And we had a very conservative administration. Principal was very, very conservative. And some of the things that during that period that we wasn't allowed to do, and we should have had the right to do that. Ed had took the leadership on a lot of that, and I just kind of reflect to one of the things that I often talked about. At that particular time, the classes wasn't allowed to use the gym. We just had a new school and had a new gym there. And we had to use, at that particular time, it's Robert Taylor now, but it used to be called the USO, and they called the Rec. And that's where we had to have our proms at. But Ed said, no, we have the privilege to use the gym. We're going to make a pass to the superintendent that we get that particular gym. And he moved ahead and to talk to the superintendent, and we was able to get the gym. And from then on, we was able to have proms in the gym at the Booker High School gymnasium. So these are some of the things that I kind of remember from Ed. And he always been a person that wasn't afraid to speak to power. You know, he was not afraid to speak up when he needed to speak up, and I've just always admired that part of his personality.
Well, as a friend and high school classmate, how did you all feel, or how did you feel when you have a high school friend saying, we're going to go talk to the administration? What kind of encouragement, what kind of feeling, what kind of sense of command over your own destiny might you have had?
Well, I think I know with me, and I think a lot of others, it carried those in our adult lives, because we saw a person that wasn't afraid to speak up and to stand out and to ask for things that was due to us. And I know with me, I think I've developed that activism throughout my life, and a lot of it came from your dad. It came from Ed James. So I just want to kind of, and a lot of other people that during that period. We always talk about the class of '57, and my class was '58. But they were kind of special. I never kind of let him know that, but definitely he was one of the special people in that class, and that class was kind of special.
Let me ask you, as we talk about courage, and we talk oftentimes, there's a saying in many communities, not just in the Black communities, but there's a saying that children should be seen and not heard. And that's an interesting contradiction in terms against that phrase. Any of you all tell me a little bit about times when you could see the parallel or the difference between this phrase, children should be heard and not seen and not heard?
Well, one of the things that when I reflect on Dad's legacy, I think about how he always said that every major revolution has been led by young people, and it was so interesting that the day that he went home to be with the Lord was also the same day that you saw young people across the country staging a national walkout in protest against some of these arcane gun laws. And I know that he was probably smiling down from heaven, encouraging those young people to continue that. But I can even remember back, it was my freshman year of high school, so that would have been 2003, 2004, when Jill Dorsett, who was the former principal of Booker High School, was fired. And there were students from around the community, but particularly at Booker High School, who staged a walkout and staged a protest. And my dad was right there encouraging those young people to have that voice and be prideful in that. And I think a few days later, those same students came down to the school board, and I was right there. I went up and I gave my spiel, but Dad was kind of there in the front row, and he never wanted to overshadow young people. Oftentimes, people who are seen as leaders in the community, want to tell young people, you can learn from me, but let me do what I'm going to do, and then when you get your time, you'll do that. But Dad always said that every major revolution has been led by young people. So that's just one of many instances in which he's kind of stepped back and allowed young people to go forth and prosper.
Thank you. Mr. Harvey, I know you must have many, many stories of this sort, especially given that you have an entire leadership program in the NAACP.
Yeah, absolutely. Just watching, Dr. James over the years, as E has already stated, he was a champion and advocate for children or young people in general. If you look at a lot of the things he did, especially in the youth arena, it was always trying to encourage and put the young people out front. I even know when I got involved, in the movement and got involved in the cause, he took the time, to walk me through, step by step, this is how you do this is how you do that, never overshadowing what it is that I was trying to do, but always pushing me out front and encouraging me, son, you can do this, you can move forward with this, but I'm going to show you how to do it. I'm not going to walk in front of you, I'm going to walk beside you, and in some cases I'm going to walk behind you, to make sure that you learn and accomplish what it is that you're trying to do.
Now, as you talk about that, how you learn and accomplish how you do, it seems to me it takes a lot of courage for young people to say, I'm going to step out here in front, particularly when the status quo, if you will, would say, wait till your turn, you're not quite ready, you don't have all the facts, you have to get information, you don't know how we do this thing around here. So how does one muster that kind of energy from a person like Dr. James?
Well, I know for me personally, I'm going to go to a personal situation now. I can remember back in 1998, 1999, somewhere around in there, I got a call from Dad, as I refer to him, the late John Rivers. Jet, I think Jet was in this meeting as well, and I believe our former mayor, Fred Atkins. So me as a young lad, 29, 30 years old, somewhere around in there, I get a call from these men, these statured men, that I look up to, call me, we want to meet with you. I'm like, okay, what have I done, but what they wanted to do was sit down and talk to me about getting involved in the political process, in the political arena, especially on the city side. And I really didn't know anything a whole lot about politics at that point in time. Was still very new and getting involved in the community. So of course I was, had some fear, begin to set in. But these men, these four men, led by Dr. James, centered themselves, around me and say, you can do this. Yes, you're young. Yes, there's a lot of things that you got to learn, but you can do this. And if you're willing to open your ears and sometimes be quiet, and take notes, we will show you the way. And I think it's issues like that, or a group of people getting around you saying, yeah, I'm young, but I can do this, because I got these guys. When you got that kind of group, backing you and behind you, you know, you walk around and say, like, you know, I'm like David, I can slap a bear.
Well, and we all know that Dr. James would have slapped the bear.
Yeah. Right. I've been on a couple of occasions where he did.
Tell us at least one of those times when he did slap a bear.
Well, I could remember, and you know, a lot of people don't know John Rivers, that was the president of the NAACP, but Ed was kind of the behind the scenes, just like Trevor was saying. The redress, that was his department. He redressed issues that was discriminatory or whatever in the community. And I can remember an incident that we had to sit down with the superintendent of the school board. And John Rivers, and that was one of the days that I was in working, and he said, Jet, I'm calling, we need to be down there at a certain time. So, which I did, I followed Ed, because we followed Ed, because Ed would meet business when he had a situation that he had to deal with. So when we got into the meeting, they started, you know, trying to communicate with each other and dialogue with each other, and looked like it wasn't going the right way. So Ed, just out of the sky blue, he hit the table with his hand, say, you better get yourself together. Hit it again. Then John Rivers went through his personality. He started going through his thing. And after a while, it was just, you know, we talk about fear. There was a fear factor. And a lot of things change in this community because of fear, the fear that African Americans were going to rise up and not going to accept it. And Ed was able to perpetuate that to the highest. So, you know, and one of the things that I kind of revert to, during that period, when we were going through all of these processes, at that particular time, out of the 3 major high schools in Sarasota, we had 39 African-American kids was graduating. And those were the issues that we were dealing with during that period. We have to start, he was saying, we have to start educating our kids. And you all are responsible for that. So we need to change the rules at these school systems. And I'm kind of proud of it now, because you look at Booker and you look at a lot of the schools, a lot of our African-American kids are going through that educational process. But a lot of that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Ed James.
Trevor talked about the political process, and you know, one of the things that's going on in Sarasota as we speak is there's a petition trying to change the Sarasota County Commission to single-member districts. Well, when we look at the makeup of the City Commission, had it not been for Ed James and John Rivers and Sheila Sanders Brown suing the city of Sarasota and changing essentially the form of districts where we had single-member districts, District 1 and District 2, we'd have not had a Fred Atkins, we would have not had a Carolyn Mason, we would not have our current mayor of Sarasota, Shelley Freeland Eddy, at least with African Americans having a seat at the table. So Dad may have not been a politician or an elected official himself, but he fundamentally understood that in order to get things done, you have to be involved in the public policy process. And sometimes that's changing the rules.
Thank you for that. We're going to take a quick break and come back and talk a little bit more about that. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Dr. Miller, so often Dr. James and yourself talked about engagement, the political process.
Yes.
Watching the elections, the Pennsylvania elections last week, what might you all be talking about were Dr. James sitting in this chair watching that election?
Yes, he probably would be asking me about the makeup of the election in terms of how Connor Lamb was able to overcome some of the things that, because you know Donald Trump was there, Donald Trump Jr. was there, Mike Pence was there, his daughter was there, so they put a lot into it. And we would always go back and forth about how the community had to be involved as far as getting out and voting is concerned. And because it was such a close vote, I think that he would be talking about how significant getting out to vote is in the community and how it makes a difference, especially as it relates to these different races where things are tight.
You know, on the talking about being tight and getting out the vote, as we talk nationally even about gerrymandered districts, juxtapose that against the single member districts that we have right here in Sarasota County, and how Dr. James and many people working with him side by side to have an influence on having a voice, because
Yes.
there was a time when people were very engaged and still just could not seem to get representation, which may even be in large part why we still hear people saying even today, my vote doesn't count, it's not going to make a difference. But tell us about what you all would be discussing in terms of single member districts or gerrymandering. And both of you can join in on this, because I know it was a conversation that all three of you would have had separately or together at any given point.
Well, one thing I would say about that, as far as he is concerned, is that Dr. James was always prepared. And when you are talking about these three districts in terms of single member districts, he would be talking about how they had to go to court, as I heard you all talking about it before, in terms of you go to court, you just can't say this is a bad thing. You have to be prepared and show statistics and show how, in terms of your research, this has really, in terms of been unconstitutional as far as one man, one vote is concerned. And he was the type of person that would always be talking about how if you had an argument, if you had something that you believe was worth fighting for, you had to be prepared to be able to go ahead and bring knowledge into dark places. And that's the kind of person he was to me.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Dr. Miller. You know, you had to be prepared. If you were going to be a student of Dr. James, you had to be prepared. You had to have all of your T's crossed and all of your I's dotted, you know, because he would often tell us all the time, before you open your mouth, make sure you have your facts in order, you know, so that when you do open your mouth, you can intelligently talk about what it is that's before you. And engagement was important. You know, we would often have these conversations. He had a very low tolerance for individuals who complained but sat on the sidelines. He had a very low tolerance for those type of, you know, people. He said, if you're not going to be a part of the process, then be quiet. You know, he would probably say something else, but, you know, be quiet, because he had a very low tolerance, you know, because he's like, if you're going to be in the game, you know, be in the game, because it's going to take all of us, you know, to be in the game. So engagement to Dr. James was just so important.
And, you know, even talking about engagement, one of the things that Dr. James always stood for was he always stood for what was right and not necessarily politically expedient. So when I think about Colin Kaepernick, one of the most favorite final words that Dad had was when he was talking about Colin Kaepernick. He said, "Colin Kaepernick gets it, so why don't you?" And you know, it seems like America's kind of getting to a time. I know he was on the front page, he was on the front cover of Time magazine and all these other magazines, and people are finally coalescing around him. But I can remember Dad, you know, always being, you know, pro Colin Kaepernick, or not necessarily pro Colin Kaepernick, but pro what he was standing for, even when it wasn't necessarily, again, politically convenient. And that's something that he always fought for. And another thing that he always stated was that he was never married to a particular political party, whether it was the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. You know, Dr. James was always about the party of the people, whatever was advancing the cause for particularly communities of color.
Well, you know, one of the things that he has taught all of us, or shared with all of us, and we oftentimes quote Dad on this, is we don't have any permanent friends or any permanent enemies. We just got permanent issues.
Permanent issues.
So what is one of those permanent issues that we've seen over the last few decades now?
Well, you know, I know one of the permanent issues that Dad and I often talked about is especially dealing with the Voting Rights Acts of 1965, you know, especially when it got gutted. You know, Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act, you know, got gutted. That continues to be one of those permanent issues, you know, that we have that has to be addressed on both sides of the spectrum. It's not, you know, a Republican thing, it's not a Democrat thing, it's not an independent thing. You know, it's a people thing, making sure that all people, you know, have the right to vote and being able to go to the polls without intimidation, but have that right, because so many people fought and died for us to have that right, and then to take that right away from us, you know, is unconstitutional.
Dr. Miller, your thoughts about no permanent enemies, no permanent friends, instances that you've actually seen that in play, where Dr. James may have been, doesn't matter what the political party was, but dealing with an issue that might even cross party lines.
Yes, thinking about this, recent special election that just took place
In Pennsylvania.
in Pennsylvania, where Connor Lamb is not the poster child for democratic ideals. He still believes in, as far as gun control is concerned, he doesn't necessarily believe that as far as assault rifles and things of that nature should be banned.
Right, he's a Democrat. Who
And he's a
some would
Democrat.
say
And he's a Democrat.
He's no Democrat, right? Just
Right.
like we hear, Republican in name only.
Right. So the thing to him would be, though, what are your interests? What do you see in these candidates that affect your everyday life, and make the assessment as far as that is concerned, as taking a vote for either one of those candidates are concerned. And there would be more, I would think, that as far as Connor Lamb is concerned, that was in tune or in line with the issues that were everyday issues as far as labor. You know, we could talk about jobs, and people are getting jobs, but are they getting a job that would go ahead and feed their family, pay for the roof over their heads? You know, those are the kind of things, everyday bread and butter issues he would be talking about, because those are the things that affect our community. So when you start talking about not having permanent friends or permanent enemies, don't get caught up in what you see out there as far as the larger community and what they're talking about, because it may have nothing to do with happening to you on an everyday basis in the community. That's why this program, Black Almanac, was so powerful, because it spoke to the everyday issues that people in our community were confronted with by no other party in this community, okay? When you talk about that type of issue, that was one of the things that I thought in terms of when we had our discussions, that he drove home every time. And the funny thing is, I might start talking about it, he would finish my sentence for me. So, I mean, he was on top of everything in terms of, may it be local, state, or national news. And personally speaking, I learned so much from that man. I mean, I was in awe of him when we sat and talked about different things that affected our community.
But he was very, very big on what was happening on the local and the state level. Yes, we will always talk about it. We have to participate in what's going on nationally, but really what affects us, the everyday person, is what's going on in your local and your state election. And oftentimes that's where we would fall asleep on, because the voter turnout would be, less than 1%, for a major county or city election. And then we'd be wondering something happens, and we was like, well, when did that happen? And so he was really, really big on making sure that the community participated in really what was going on local and at a state level, because that impacted us on an everyday level.
This is so true. So even things like the election our special election that's going to be coming up on March 20th,
Yes.
what would he be talking about regarding the election on March 20th and people turning out for that vote?
Well, I mean, he's always been a fierce advocate for schools, and this is essentially a referendum, right? And this is the most local of the local elections that you can do. And he would really be encouraging folks, particularly people of color, to get out, get off of their behinds, and go cast their ballots. And because, people will continue to ignore you until you assert yourself, until you assert your dominance, or assert that you are in the room, and you assert that you are in the arena. And people always like to call Dad Big Ed because of his physical stature, but I'd like to think of him as Big Ed because he asserted himself in a room, no matter how big or how big he was in terms of physical stature. And that's all he wanted other people to do, was give them the courage to stand up and assert themselves. And he fundamentally believed, and I believe that with him, that it starts at the ballot box.
Yeah,
Okay.
and he would bring light to dark places. That's the kind of thing, picking up on what Trevor mentioned as far as the local and state issues. I remember he would have Shelley Freeland-Eddy, who was our current mayor in Sarasota, and she would be talking about different laws that the legislature had put in place that people on an everyday basis did not have any idea about, but could affect them in terms of its implementation. So, you know, when you start talking about edifying and making sure that the community understood first as far as getting out and voting is concerned and what kind of leaders you're going to vote, because they're going to have an impact on your life as far as the laws that they're going to put in place, and then have them come back and talk about those laws, okay? Because everyday people who are going about taking their children to school or to their job or what have you may not have any idea about some of the laws that have been enacted. But he would have people on to talk about those different things so that the community would be educated about the different things that are affecting them. And that's, how, in terms of being a community treasure, that we have lost so much in terms of him not being here anymore. And the thing to me here is that I think his greatest legacy is that he brought people to the table to talk about different things that would change the lives of so many people. And you asked me earlier about whose lives did he change. Well, I could tell you right off the bat, he changed mine. Because I came here from New York and I had no idea about Sarasota or Manatee. And he taught me so much about this community and what it was about. And I had a job with the city of Sarasota to go ahead and do redevelopment. And if not for him, I wouldn't have any idea about, you know, some of the history, some of the different things that took place here and how people fought and who's real and who, you know, you got to look out for and those kind of things. But he was always a man that I could depend upon.
Well, Dr. Miller, that means a lot coming from you, because I know that all of us sitting here on set and many of us in the audience would say, if there's one thing that Dr. James used to chuckle about, it would be the New Yorkers who come here to teach us everything. So he would be very pleased to hear you say that he taught you some things coming from Sarasota, Florida.
That's right, no question.
We have about a minute left, and in that minute, Mr. Harvey, tell us some of the things, tell us what you think from a legacy standpoint you will remember about Dr. James.
We can be here all day about that. What I'm going to remember most by Dr. James Pop is just, for me, you know, manhood. I think he taught me so much as a young lad, getting in the movement, just about being a man. You know, he would always tell me, you know, keep your family first. Don't let this community kill you. You know, he would tell me those kinds of stories. But just, you know, be a man, stand on your own 2 feet. Your word is your bond, and make it happen.
His namesake.
Yes.
In 30 seconds, tell us, what do you want people to know about your father?
My father truly stood by the phrase that no matter what kind of curveball life throws you, giving up is never an option. Until the final days of his life, Dad never gave up. He continued to fight. And he instilled that not only in all of his 3 children, but into so many people in the community. And I'm just privileged to have spent 28 years of my life with, in my opinion, the world's greatest father, the world's greatest mentor, and the greatest freedom fighter that I've ever known in my life.
Thank you all. Thank you for joining us on Black Almanac today. And as Dr. James would say, after more than 7 decades of political and civic engagement, if you're not engaged, don't complain.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. And as soon as I start to make my breakfast, Hamilton is right there. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath. He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties. He knows he's a pretty big deal. I mean, look at this little face. How could you not love him?
There was this big bruise on my friend's face. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to think her own nephew could have hit her.
I didn't want to see it. My mother's bank account was emptied, and a caregiver had taken control of it.
I didn't want to see it. My father's refrigerator, there was hardly anything in it. That's unusual for him.
It's tough to see that a senior citizen is being abused, physically, emotionally, sexually, or financially. Elder abuse is a crime.
So see the signs. Stop the crimes.
Keep up with the Suncoast. Watch your favorite ABC7 shows on your streaming device.